I'm coming. Great to see you, Sean. And this is the Ingraham Angle from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham. We have so much good stuff for you tonight. I don't know if we're going to fit it into an hour, but we're going to try. You're not going to want to move the dial. Keep it parked right there, because with the deadline looming this week, how is President Trump going to deal with the Democrats who are now threatening to shut down the government if they don't get a DACA deal? And we recall the heart and soul of Martin Luther King on this day, the inconvenient truth the left tries pretty hard to ignore. That's MLK's deep and abiding faith. And which state has the worst poverty in America? The answer will probably shock you, and it's more proof that you can't spend your way out of problems. Oh boy, and the celebrity freak out over that erroneous missile alert in Hawaii. My choice words for them are straight ahead. But we begin tonight with the race to the bottom this Martin Luther King Day. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase, Dr. King said more than 50 years ago. It's beautiful. President Trump showed good faith last week in that bipartisan meeting where he allowed the cameras in for almost an hour as they discussed DACA and immigration. And although he didn't see the entire staircase leading to the final agreement, he told Democrats and Republicans, all of them that were present, what he needed to get to yes. He needed an end to chain migration and the wall in exchange for a path to legalization for those 800,000 illegal immigrants. 2 days later, the Democrats, acting in bad faith along with Lindsey Graham, presented him a deal that they knew he couldn't accept. It increased chain migration and did not sufficiently fund the wall. A total non-starter. So after the president nixed it, Senator Durbin rushed out to mischaracterize off-color remarks about the corruption in the third world that drives citizens of those countries away into the United States. Well, that set off a firestorm. Everyone from Al Sharpton to LeBron James weighed in, declaring Trump toxic on the issue of race. And then despicable columns like this further poison the well. Yeah, I love that nuance by Charles Blow. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus predictably are piling on.
I've called him a racist, deplorable, despicable, added to what others are calling him, a moron, ignorant, on and on and on.
Do you think President Trump is a racist?
I think he is a racist.
Now, if I were a conspiracy theorist and watching how this whole thing is played out, I'd almost want to say the entire thing was a setup. Let's talk about what's really going on here. The Democrats cannot afford for Trump to be successful, particularly among African Americans. Unemployment among African Americans was 7.9% in 2016. Last month, it was down over a point to 6.8%. That's a record. Weekly earnings for African Americans up nearly 2%. Home ownership among African Americans has ticked up to 42%. Given the success of Trump's policies for Black America and the left's tragic record, they've decided to demonize the president as a racist. It's all they have. Disturbin' Durbin went so far as to claim that the president was racist for using the term chain migration.
When it came to the issue of, quote, chain migration, I said to the president, do you realize how painful that term is to so many people? African Americans believe that they migrated to America in chains. And when you speak about chain migration, it hurts them personally.
Well, then we found this.
The DREAM Act would not allow what is known as chain migration. In fact, DREAM Act students would have very limited ability to sponsor their family members.
Yeah, it's when Trump uses it, it's racist. When he uses it, it's just descriptive. And incidentally, Lindsey Graham, who supposedly upbraided the president for calling certain countries S-holes, had no trouble using his own tough language when referring to certain countries.
The people coming across the southern border live in hellholes. They don't like that. They want to come here. Our problem is we can't have everybody in the world who lives in a hellhole coming to America.
Oh, how rude. So are Graham and Durbin racist? If we apply the same logic they want us to apply to Trump, well, I guess they are. That's ridiculous, of course. The left is now circling the wagons on this. And now we learn that John Lewis, Maxine Waters, Frederica Wilson, remember with the cowboy hat, and a few others are boycotting the State of the Union. Now, you got to be kidding me. They should all be attending to thank the president for all he's doing to better the lives of African Americans. On my radio show today, author and Hoover Institution fellow Shelby Steele had these choice words for Congressman Lewis.
John Lewis lacks the imagination, and has been so well rewarded for his history of protest that he just keeps beating that drum. He keeps trying to protest, thinking that that's what's going to get us ahead. It's not. Protest is over for Black Americans. We have to rely on the individual developing their skills, their talents, competing in the world.
Now, if the congressional Democrats and celebs in the fields of entertainment and sports, if they really wanted to help struggling minorities, they would work with, not against President Trump, to continue to expand economic and educational opportunities like school choice for all people. But thankfully, I was actually heartened by this. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee has not announced plans that she'll join the no-shows at the State of the Union. Now, let's be real. It would take a nuclear holocaust for her to give up that camera-ready real estate she always occupies on the aisle. Is she already there, camped out? She has to come on the show. I think she's fun. I like her. As usual, regular working people tend to have a better handle on the truth than the swamp dwellers here in Washington. I want you to listen to a few of my callers from my show today.
We are doing much better under President Trump than we did when we counted on our own person, so to speak. President Obama, he did very little directly to help our community. We thought when we elected him, he would indeed do what Donald Trump is doing, make America great. Instead, he divided America.
Trump is not a racist guy. You know, Trump is trying to get equality for Americans. You know, and somehow everybody's thinking, oh, he's so racist. Oh, it's a racist comment. And he's not. He just wants what's best for Americans, black, white, or other.
That's why I love radio. I hear from real people every day. It's my own focus group, ongoing. It's pretty obvious why the Democrats have themselves so worked up into this racial frenzy. They are petrified of a Republican president who actually delivers tangible economic results for Black and Hispanic Americans. Democrats are racial monopolists, and they're not about to allow President Trump to break their stranglehold on the Black and Hispanic voters without a really nasty fight, which is what you're seeing right now. Now, check this out. The Atlantic is reporting that the president's support among African Americans is up. That's the Atlantic magazine. It's not a conservative think tank. In fact, by the way, that support among African Americans has nearly doubled. When he was elected back in 2016, only 13% of Black men supported Trump. Now, according to a new survey of more than 600,000 people, Trump's support among African American men is up to 23%. He's also gone up somewhat with Black women from 4%, that's a pathetic number in 2016, to now, a little bit better, 11% in this latest poll. I'm telling you this, as the financial benefits of Trump's policies touch the pocketbooks and the neighborhoods of the Black community, the old Democratic charges and hysteria will look more and more unhinged. Now, is this really what Dr. King dreamed about? Faith, freedom, and equal opportunity were at the heart of Dr. King's vision for his fellow Americans and fellow Black Americans. And today, who's closer to helping more of our citizens realize that vision? President Trump, who in a year has already shown incredible results? Or Democrats, who when they're out of power and out of ideas, simply call their opponents racists? I think you know the answer. And that's the angle. Joining us now for reaction from Easley, South Carolina, is Pastor Mark Burns, who supported President Trump during the campaign. And with me here in Washington is Wendy Asefo, who's a Democratic strategist. It's great to see both of you. Happy MLK Day. Wendy, let's start with you. Tell me what I got wrong in that angle.
Well, first we will start off by saying that the unemployment rate for African Americans was at 16.8% in 2010 and it went down to 7.9% last year under Obama. So Obama has started this trend. So for the president to take ownership of that is completely statistically dubious because he cannot. The president, Obama, was the one who started this trend. Second of all, when it comes to Trump, he hasn't done anything tangible that we can point to say that he's helped African Americans. What's really important here is causation does not equate correlation. Just because he's in the office does not mean he caused things to happen.
Well, who does cause things to happen?
Well, we can point to Obama.
If you're the chief executive, in other words. So you want to give Obama credit. And I think
he deserves it. Well, at that time.
Okay, yeah. But I'm agreeing with you there. So you want to give Obama credit for working on the economy with the Republicans, because remember they had control of Congress, and so the unemployment did come down. Well, this is great. So he gets credit as chief executive, but when things go well, when Trump is chief executive, he doesn't get credit. I'm just confused about that.
No, because it's been on a downward trajectory for 8 years, so he hasn't done anything or implemented anything to make a change.
Downward trajectory.
It
what does that even mean?
It means it's gone from 16.8 to 7.9 last year. Also,
I thought you meant Trump was in a downward trajectory.
What Trump has done is he has rolled back civil liberties in the DOJ. We see that he's rescinded the grant, which makes it so that police officers and community have good relations. He says he's going to cut 121 people from the civil liberties division, civil rights division of the DOJ. I mean, he has done tangible things to hurt the community. And just
why is the numbers going up among African American men? 600,000 people surveyed, African American men and women. His numbers are going up. Why do you think that is? Are they just misguided, or?
It's not that they're misguided, but one thing I wanted to say that's really important before I let the pastor talk is that African American and black is not the same thing. When we talk about statistics and we use those words interchangeably, we're measuring for two different groups and populations, because when you say black, you're including Haitians, Nigerians, people from African diaspora. They do count, and that's why those statistics are more important, is the ones that survey black Americans, not the ones that just survey African Americans, because you're excluding a large majority of people.
I'm not sure they excluded anyone except, I think the entire survey was of all black people, regardless of derivation of where you came from. I'm pretty sure, but we'll check into that. Pastor Burns, Wendy said a lot. Your reaction?
Well, you know, I think it's sad that we, here in 2017, instead of focusing on the accomplishments of President Donald Trump within his first year of the presidency, not just what he's done for African Americans, or how I call it, black Americans, because I was always born and bred here in America. I have descendants from Africa, but I'm an American. And the fact is, Dr. Martin Luther King did not fight and die so that we can inherit black America. He fought and died so that we as black people can be Americans. We already had black America in segregation. You went to black stores, black people assembled together. You lived in black communities, black neighborhoods. We already had black America. That's why Dr. King marched. That's why Rosa Parks sit down and didn't stand up. It's because we as black Americans, we fought, and Dr. King fought, and others before me fought so that we can be Americans. And the fact is, the Democratic Party will hone in on anything that will paint the president as racist, because it's a distraction of the real issues.
Well, what about my point?
Is, you already said it. African American unemployment is at an all-time low in the history of the unemployment under President Donald Trump.
It's never been recorded any lower. But my point, my deeper point in the angle is, the Democrats need to keep black Americans unhappy. And I know it's a horrible thing to feel, but I'm sorry. Dr. Steele said this today on my radio show. He's written about it for years. Without the perpetual I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim mentality that you drill into people's heads, you're a victim, you don't have an equal shot, you can't, if you work hard, you're not going to get ahead. What kind of a message is that to tell young people today? He went on and on about this today, and it was riveting radio. And I think when things are getting better and people refuse to acknowledge it and say, I'm a victim, I don't think that helps a single person get a job. I don't think it helps a single young African-American man or woman have more hope. I think it drags people down when people should be lifted up as they are in a growing economy. And Wendy, I'll let you respond.
Yeah, first of all, African Americans, black Americans, we are not victims. We cannot say that. We are uplifted. Our communities are doing well. They can do better. The Democrats are not trying to victimize us by any way. And for us to paint that narrative is part of the problem. It's part of the problem. We are okay. We are doing well. We are striving. We are making ourselves better, and we can pull ourselves up from the bootstraps. But for us to think and not look at the systematic hurdles that our society has would be for us to be blind to what's going on in our country.
What systematic hurdles specifically right now are you referring to in the economy? If you work hard, if you know, all the studies, if you work hard, you stay out of jail, you wait until you're married to have kids, you have, like, what is it, Pastor, right, 85% chance of living a middle-class life in the United States. I mean, that's an irrefutable statistic.
And I'm glad you brought up the point of if you stay out of jail. It's easy to say if you stay out of the jail if it's by your own volition. When we look at our criminal justice system, we see that when it comes to black and brown individuals, our criminal justice system is harsher on black and brown individuals. We can commit the same.
But you just said we're not victims. That sounds like a victim.
No, we are not. We're not victims, but our society makes it such that if you commit a crime and you're black and brown, you have a higher rate of being in prison than your white counterparts. That is a fact.
So do you believe that Chicago's crime rate is the fault of Donald Trump?
No.
Detroit, L.A., Oakland,
no,
Baltimore. Is that Donald Trump's fault?
It's not Donald Trump's fault.
Whose fault is it?
But there are policies. There are policies within our society that make it so that those issues continue to be perpetuated in Chicago.
Okay, well, there's a lot there. Criminal justice reform, that's a big topic. Probably can't handle that in 2 minutes. But, I mean, there is a huge crime problem that has been exacerbated by open borders. African-American families and young men are hurt by a glut of cheap labor that's crossed the borders that has hurt the lowest wage earners in the country more than anyone else. And Donald Trump's actually trying to do something about that, including MS-13, which is plaguing the inner city as well. But you can go ahead, Pastor.
So we don't want to talk about policies. We only want to talk about feelings. We don't want to talk about facts. We want to talk about feelings. Again, President Trump has made it very clear that the only true way to eliminate those violent places like Chicago and Baltimore is to give real opportunities, to give real financial boost into these communities. It's not the police. It's the fact. It's the lack of opportunities. And when you look at the history of the world, from the French Revolution, from England, the revolution that's taken place, I don't care what color you are. If you feel like you're backed into the corner, and because of those few people who have and the majority who have not, I don't care what race you are, you eventually become violent when you're fighting over food. And that's what's happening in America. Listen, I said it earlier, Dr. King didn't die so that we can fight for bread. And the thing is, we keep talking about black America or black Americans like we're separate from Americans. We are Americans. What happens to me should happen to my brother, my sister, if you're an American. And the fact is, the Democratic Party for years who have used and abused the black voice in America, that, you know, we want to talk about what Donald Trump said in private meetings.
Yeah, well,
words do matter, but deeds matter more. Well, and the fact is, Democrats have been doing a lot of talking, but little deeds. That's
all right,
true.
Pastor, we're out of time. Wendy, I'm going to have you on radio. We can even have a longer segment. Love to have you both. It's a great conversation, and I actually think we can make some progress on this issue, and I really appreciate both of your voices. And by the way, the Democrats are threatening to shut down the government, speaking of a glut across the border, if they don't get DACA and that deal done this week. That debate with lawmakers from both sides of the aisle next. It's me and my best friend. President Trump tweeted yesterday, DACA is probably dead because the Democrats don't really want it. They just want to talk and take desperately needed money away from our military. Well, if they don't get a deal protecting dreamers, Democrats have threatened to hold up spending in the, of course, government funding bill, and it's needed by midnight on Friday to avoid that shutdown. So will the president call their bluff? Let's bring in Republican Congressman Sean Duffy in Wausau, Wisconsin, and Democratic Congressman Darren Soto in Orlando. Congressman Soto, I want to start with you, and I want to thank you for coming on the show. And I want to tell you that we make a real effort every day to get Democrat congressmen on and give them a fair chance, just like with Republicans, to make their case. I just want to say thank you. So thank you for joining us. Sean,
my pleasure being here.
Sean, I'm used to seeing you, so it's fine. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. Thanks, Congressman Soto, let's start with you. Will the Democrats really hold up the government funding for a deal for the DACA people?
You know, we're hopeful that this is a moment where the parties can work together. We have Graham and Durbin who've come out with a bipartisan plan, including border security as well as help for our dreamers. And we're hopeful that the Senate will lead the way and put a bill out that will go to the House floor and that Speaker Ryan will give us an opportunity to be able to vote on it so that we're not talking about shutdowns, but coming up with a generational deal to help out with two issues both parties care about.
Why do you think, before we go to Congressman Duffy, why do you think that Durbin and Graham went into that meeting with the two things that they knew the president couldn't agree to? It would increase chain migration, and, of course, there wasn't adequate funding for the wall. I mean, he said, I need this and this, then we'll do the legalization of the Dreamers. They came in and they offered things that would actually make it worse.
Well, I think you have to start somewhere, and then the president can come back with what he perceives as chain migration and make a counteroffer on it. And then there's the concern over the wall. You know, there's not a lot of support for the wall in the Senate, and, you know, it's controversial in the House, and it doesn't help where I'm from in Florida. We care about port security and Coast Guard and other things. So, you know, I think you have to put something out there to get a response from the president.
I want to play for you, Congressman Duffy, something that Bill Clinton said back in 1995. Let's watch.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
Look at the bipartisan applause. That sounds like Trump, Congressman Duffy. What's going on? I had forgotten that.
I don't come on and say I agree with Bill Clinton that often, but I do tonight, Laura. I mean, this is an easy solution. I think it's great that Darren's on here as well having a conversation, and it sounds like he wants to get a deal. But the deal that was proposed is that Democrats get everything where you give a legal status to Dreamers, and you give Donald Trump 10% of what he wants, which is for his wall. I mean, if we reverse that and said, well, we'll just take 10% of the Dreamers, they get to stay and get 100% of the wall, Darren would be here with his hair on fire saying, well, that's not fair. Let's cut a deal that works for the Dreamers, where we secure the border, we end chain migration, and we once and for all deal with these kids. Laura, this is about compassion and love, and Trump talks about this all the time. And the compassion and love of the Trump policy is you give certainty to the Dreamers, you end the next generation of Dreamers because you have a wall there to stop them from coming in. But not only that, it's compassionate for America because we stop the meth and the heroin and the human trafficking and drugs that come over and across our border. So this is a great policy that works for our country, for Dreamers. I think both sides could cut a deal, but you have Nancy Pelosi, who's out there right now saying, I want only Dreamer legislation or a clean Dreamer bill and nothing for Donald Trump. That standoff leads us to a potential shutdown on behalf of Democrats, and I think that's wrong.
Congressman Soto, Democrats are saying a handful, that they're not going to come to the State of the Union. John Lewis, Maxine Waters, others say Donald Trump's a racist. We're not going to countenance him as president. Basically, he's not our president, and they're not coming. What does that do to forge a bipartisan deal on the Dreamers or immigration enforcement, that type of toxicity?
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues. I'll be attending and bringing an evacuee from Puerto Rico who's now here in Florida to highlight how we still don't have power down on the island in a lot of areas. But I think if the Senate can bring something over to the House, then Sean and Speaker Ryan and others will have the opportunity to be able to put their 2 cents in about what they want, and let's get a vote on the floor on it. But I think, you know, we'll all be listening to the State of the Union, at least those of us who are attending, to see if there is any reconciliation message or any additional input from
But Congressman, how do you reconcile, I don't mean to interrupt, but how do you reconcile with people who run out of a meeting, a private meeting, and their effort is to whip people into a racial frenzy about Trump? How is that operating in good faith? Trump didn't shut down negotiations. He just said, I can't do that. And they rush out and say, oh, the president's a racist. I mean, how is that going to forge a deal? That's just not good faith at all.
Well, I think they were shocked about what was allegedly said. Obviously, no one knows for sure. Maybe it would have been better to just keep that closed-minded, but they felt the need to speak out. Either way, I think we need to get past these distractions and go to what both parties want, which is help for our dreamers, help for TPS, and help for border security.
Yeah.
And I think if we can get something through the Senate to the House, let it take its course and let a bill go onto the president's desk. And if he doesn't like it, he has the power to veto it.
I think the McCall bill, that Goodlatte bill, I think that should be the bill. Push that over to the Senate. Why don't we do that? I think the House people have a better solution. But gentlemen, it's great to see both of you. And by the way, what the left and their media allies will not tell you up next about Martin Luther King when we return. Keep it here. You might not have known that Martin Luther King's doctorate was in theology. The left have been diligently scrubbing much of the religious references from King's legacy, ignoring his deep Christian faith as the source of his activism on behalf of equality. Joining us now for reaction, my old friend, radio producer Lee Habib, currently a columnist for Town Hall, who joins us from Memphis, Tennessee, and in Columbia, South Carolina, Antoine Seawright, Democratic strategist and CEO of Blueprint Strategy. Gentlemen, great to see both of you. Lee, you just wrote about this today. You believe that much of the King legacy has become secularized. How so?
Well, listen to the media talk about King. It's going to be Dr. King, Dr. King, Dr. King, and not Reverend King. Listen to the speeches they play. It's the secular ones. I would urge your audience to go to Google and type in "knock at midnight" sermon. And it's a knock at midnight sermon, a deeply religious sermon. Or when Jesus calls a man a fool. Indeed, the source of Martin Luther King's inspiration was a book called the Bible, which he quoted more than any 100 books combined, Laura.
We have actually a graphic of the speech you're talking about, the sermon you're talking about, Martin Luther King. Moral principles have lost their distinctiveness. For modern man, absolute right and wrong are a matter of what the majority is doing. Right and wrong are relative to likes and dislikes and the customs of a particular community. We've unconsciously applied Einstein's theory of relativity, which properly described the physical universe, to the moral and ethical realm. This mentality has brought a tragic breakdown of moral standards, and the midnight of moral degeneration deepens. Antoine, I love that passage that Lee put in his column today, but he's right. You don't really hear Dr. King talking about moral relativism. I don't know what he would think about what's happened to our country today, but that was pretty amazing.
Well, unless I'm living in some other universe that you guys are not living in, the reference to Dr. King that we make here in South Carolina and places I go is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, because he was a pastor before he was all those other things. And if you look at Dr. King's body of work and the things he's fought for justice and equality and fighting for the least of these, he really stood for what the Bible talks about in Matthew 25 and 40 and fighting for the least of these. Well, when you look at what's going on in our country right now, Laura, I don't think that Dr. King will be pleased about the current people occupying our government on what they feel and what they're doing towards the least of these. Dr. King was about expanding our rights to vote at the ballot box. He was about health care for everyone. He was about making sure that we have a fair and balanced criminal justice system. He was about making sure that poor people have the resources they need to be pulled out of certain situations. I don't think we have that going on right now in our government, Lauren.
Okay, so let's see what CNN tweeted today. You say people are recognizing King's religious legacy.
The people CNN, I know. I was in a church today where we referenced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Well, in a church, that makes sense, but I'm talking on regular media. CNN's tweet, he's an environmental hero. He was a socialist before it was cool. He never let a political disagreement turn nasty. Many Americans have turned up Martin Luther King into a safe holiday mascot, but some say King still speaks in ways that go beyond civil rights. He was a socialist before it was cool. Lee, what about that?
You know, it would be interesting now to look at what Dr. King and Martin Luther King and Reverend King would think about the lurch to the left in America and Europe. Because everywhere in the world where the government leans further left, the churches get smaller. The churches get smaller. And Antoine, this is just a fact. And we know in this great country that the out-of-wedlock birth rate is 40%. That's white, black, and Latino combined. And I would love to know what Reverend King would think about this dissolution of marriage in this country.
I would be curious to know. I would be curious to know what Reverend King would think about the leader of the free world calling NFL athletes who are peacefully protesting SOBs. I would love to see what Reverend King would talk about a budget that comes out of the White House that cuts programs like Meals on Wheels.
But you're making our point,
I would
Antoine.
love to see.
You're making the point of the segment, which you said wasn't valid. The point of the segment is Martin Luther King based his philosophy on the Bible. And when he talked about moral degeneration, that went right to the heart of what Lee was just saying. The degeneration of the family. Once the family dissolves, as it has across all racial lines, especially hard hit are African-American families and young men. It's hard hit. Once that happens, government can really not save you. It can't save you.
Well,
we have to save ourselves.
Government.
We have to save ourselves.
Government can be a bootstrap for a number of people to pull them out of certain situations. It's called investing where we need to be.
We've tried it for 50 years. 50 years, $5 trillion. What has it gotten us?
Laura, we have not
done
that effectively. We have not. Look at K-12 education in this country.
Well, okay, are you for school choice? Are you for school choice?
I am totally against school choice because it will eventually lead us back to a place of segregation.
So you want to keep the kids in underperforming schools? Okay, all right. So you want to keep the kids in underperforming schools?
I want to invest equally, Laura. I want to invest equally in schools to make sure that schools are funded equitably.
But what I would like, you certainly can't blame Trump for Chicago. You certainly can't blame Trump for Baltimore. We don't know what Martin Luther King would probably think about anything.
It's so easy to point back to those situations, but what I can blame Trump for are policies in this country that really hurt a certain segment of the population. That's what I can blame Trump for.
I don't know what Barack Obama did for 8 years. Don't talk when I'm talking, and I'll let you talk. But we're out of time. But Barack Obama was president for 8 years. We had skyrocketing crime among hard-hit communities that Martin Luther King did care a lot about in Baltimore,
and so you're going to point to.
And it wasn't on Donald Trump's watch. It wasn't on Donald Trump's watch. It was on the Democrats running those cities who are more interested in keeping people angry and giving people real solutions. That's my view. Guys, great segment. And you're going to be shocked to learn, by the way, where the worst poverty in America resides. Details on the effects of more liberal governance next.
Everybody.
All right, when you think of the worst poverty in America, you might not immediately think of the Golden State, home to the tech industry, of course, and Hollywood. But new Census Bureau info confirms that nearly 1 in 5 California residents are considered poor. Other details highlighted in an op-ed published in the LA Times reveal that California spent nearly $958 billion from 1992 to 2015. And it's home to one in three of the nation's welfare recipients, a third. It has 883,000 full-time state and local government employees. Oh, that's all. And as a result, is home to 25% of the nation's total homeless population. Wow. This liberal dystopia is exactly the type of governance the left wants to unleash across the entire country. Why not? It's working well for California. With us from L.A. is someone with firsthand knowledge of this dire situation. Shirley Hussar is a columnist for the Washington Times and CEO of Urban Game Changer. Shirley, I was stunned to see this piece in the LA Times today. Friends from LA were texting me. It's like texting. I said, I've already read it. It didn't really surprise me because you and I have been talking about this for so many years. The Golden State has turned into a big government magnet for illegal immigrants and now welfare recipients. It's staggering.
It is very staggering. Thank you, Laura, for having me on your show. By the way, it's Chocolate City night, and I'm feeling good. I'm on. Let me just say this about California. California is being held hostage by a liberal progressive agenda to taxate the middle class very heavily. I mean, we have gas tax. We have taxes within our bills when we go out and eat in LA City called the healthy tax. You know, Laura, there's this old saying that if California goes, then the rest of the country goes as well. They're using California California as a progressive agenda template, so the rest of you guys will fall in line with what we're suffering right here.
Yeah, it's like a test tube. We're trying this out in California and get ready for the big push of all these policies. Well, when you hear what was said earlier today, Shirley, and a lot of the California congressmen repeating the trope, Donald Trump's a racist, Donald Trump hates black people. I mean, you just hear the same, it's the drumbeat, despite really good and powerful economic news in just 1 year. We had a guest on earlier. She's very nice, but she said, look, Barack Obama's the one who really brought unemployment down from 16% among African Americans to 7.8%. So he's the one who really deserves the credit. That was quite a big drop. But nevertheless, in a year, we've seen huge economic gains for African Americans under Trump. He gets no credit.
Oh, you know, he gets no credit because they don't want to give credit where credit is truly due. This administration is making a major change within history. It's a historical administration, which the Trump administration is doing for black people. Look, under Obama, we are down to 6% California African Americans. We have no blacks in California. It's devastating for blacks in California. They're using us as a progressive liberal agenda. Look at here we are. We are in Martin Luther King, the 50th anniversary. You know what the signs they have, Laura, in California? They said that AIDS is a civil rights issue, and they used the face of Dr. King on billboards in California. They're playing with the minds of African Americans and taking our legacy as hostage. The real dreamers are the black dreamers, the young black dreamers who are part of the mass incarceration, in our privatized prison. Yes.
Shirley, I'm going to see you in a few days in LA, and we're going to hang out together. And I can't wait to have you on. We're going to have you on in a couple days because we're going to be able to do this in person.
Girl, you know, you're my girl. I love you. I love you. You are on point.
Back at you.
And we're going to make it real because you got real chocolate on your show. Represent.
I need to hang out with you more. You always put me in a good mood, too. All right, coming up, a false missile alert causes some Hollywood actors, well, to go into the stratosphere attacking the president. My message to two of them, not going to want to miss this. Imagine waking up to an emergency alert from the government that a missile is about to hit the place where you live. Well, the idyllic islands of Hawaii were gripped with panic on Saturday when someone screwed up, leaving residents thinking the worst for almost 40 minutes. Parents threw children down storm drains for protection. I wouldn't have thought of that. Others tried to find basements to shelter in until they got the oops, it was a mistake message. Nothing funny about this all, though. But the instant reaction among some Hollywood lunatrons, that's another story, really funny. Two in particular stood out, Jamie Lee Curtis and Jim Carrey. Jamie Lee knew who was really to blame for the flood warning, tweeting, "This Hawaii missile scare is on you, Mr. Trump. The real fear that mothers and fathers and children felt is on you. It's on your arrogance, hubris, narcissism, rage, ego, immaturity, and your unstable idiocy. Shame on your hate-filled self. You did this." Since it may be her only frame of reference, Jamie wants her followers to believe that Trump is Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise. Never mind, this was a screw-up by the democratically run state of Hawaii, Jamie Lee. Well, millennials may know Jamie Lee Curtis from the Activia yogurt ads. Remember, it makes you regular. But she was a pretty big star back in her day. However, when you're that hateful without a single fact on your side, well, Jamie, all I can say is you're far from perfect. Oh, remember that movie with John Travolta? Now, I might not look to her for political analysis, but if I'm looking for a great pair of leg warmers, I'm calling her first. But we're so looking forward to her appearance in Halloween 40. I wish you were kidding. They're filming it. And then there's Jim Carrey, the actor and comedian known for his groundbreaking work in Liar Liar and Dumb and Dumber. He tweeted, "If we allow this one-man Gomorrah and his corrupt Republican Congress to continue alienating the world, we're headed for suffering beyond all imagination." Never understating things. Suffering? You mean what moviegoers went through watching much of your output over the last 20 years? Masterpieces like Me, Myself, and Irene, The Cable Guy, Fun with Dick and Jane, and that real tour de force, the number 23. Pardon us if we ignore your political theorizing, Jim. Oh, sorry, I can't let the moment pass without mentioning the worst Batman movie ever, Batman Forever. How many of you saw that? Oh. Well, he did rock the green leotard playing the Riddler and that pinkish red dye job. We'll be right back. Before we go, here's a patriotic response to NFL players who refuse to stand during the national anthem. The word stand will be laser engraved on the barrel of a new handgun from firearms maker Sig Sauer. Great guns, by the way, made in New Hampshire. And it will honor veterans and first responders. The American flag will be on the other side. And a portion of the sales will be donated to a group named Honored American Veterans Afield, which works with wounded veterans and active duty military personnel. And by the way, I'm putting up a poll, not about which gun is your favorite gun, if you live in a place where you can get... No, it's not that. It's a poll question about Jim Carrey, since he's a constant critic of the president. What was his worst movie ever? Okay? And it'll be up in just a few moments. So go to Facebook, tweet me, tell me what you want to hear more of on the show. I always love hearing from you. And that is it for The Angle tonight. See you here tomorrow night. Take it away, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Laura. Here is what